Hello, this video is going to be kind of a tutorial, kind of a paint along. Everything's going to be in real time from start to finish, so no time lapse or anything like that. Initially I wanted to do the commentary as I was painting in real time, kind of commentate myself, but it wasn't quite turning out how I wanted it to, so I stopped talking and I'm going to add some commentary in post. I hope you find this helpful and enjoyable.
I'm really not too worried about the background for the purposes of this tutorial. I just have some brown black mixed with sap green and some ultramarine blue, just a touch of yellow. But for the purposes of this tutorial, it really doesn't make much of a difference what the background is. I'm going for something kind of dramatic here, I guess. And I'm just leaving the background very vague and open to interpretation. pigmentation, as you can probably tell. Now the part you're probably here for. That's getting into the deer itself. So first I'm just going to block it in.
And all that entails is just starting with a mid-tone in the overall shade of the deer. Something that we can add our darks to and our lights to. And I start off with this neutral brown that's not too light or too dark in order to have a base to work with. And I'm using a flat brush to try to get some sharp edges on the border of the deer itself. I'm sorry if my hand gets in the way sometimes. I still need to get better at keeping it out of the way. There we go. Right in the way. And so now I'm going into the shadow areas, starting with the hip, kind of, and then moving along to the far side of the deer that's going to be in the shadow, so the light's coming from the right. And so everything that's obscured from the sun is going to be darker, of course. So things on the left side. Now kind of going back in with the mid-tone again. And again, I'm sorry for my hand. I need to get better at that. But the top of the deer's head tends to have darker fur than the rest, so that's why it's a little bit darker on top. And then while the paint is still wet, you can kind of blend the edges in there. It's not easy with acrylics because they dry so quickly, but so now I'm adding highlights to the top of the deer where the sun is going to be shining on it. So just use some light color, add a little bit more yellow than in the neutral base. And this is the point where I kind of stopped doing the commentary as I was painting because it just wasn't turning out how I thought it would, because I wasn't really trusting the process. But it ended up turning out fine, and that's a lesson right there, is just to trust how you're planning on carrying out the painting. But I didn't get frustrated and just continued to move forward with the plan. And it ended up turning out well. So I'm still just adding highlights here and there. The sun is going to strike the neck and shoulder because they're raised from the rest of the deer slightly. Same goes with its belly and some of these other areas. And so I'm just applying stark highlights here, I guess, without worrying too much about the blending at this point, but just getting the values down. And now I'm going back in with an intermediate color and kind of blending those edges in and going back and forth between a light and a dark value and trying to create a gradient there. I will learn how to keep my hand out of the way. And there's a point I've reached right now where I'm kind of going back and forth between lights and darks and developing the painting. And now I'm getting into the face. And a white-tailed deer has a light patch right on its throat. And you don't start with the lightest color that this is going to end up. I kind of start with something that's obviously not white, and then you'll work up to the highlights. So it's a little darker. And then a whitetail also has a patch of white kind of on its snout. And its ears. And we're going to go back with the highlights later. So don't go too crazy. And we'll be adding those characteristic white circles around the eyes. And now I'm going back and adding a very dark color for the nose and eyes. Using a script liner. I don't know what size, something small. That's not important exactly what brush.
And I'll be fixing that up, that's for sure.
So I kind of messed up there. And don't stress mistakes like that. Just let it dry and I'll end up going back and fixing it later. No big deal. So right here, those characteristic circles around the eyes of the deer. And see, I messed up and now kind of smeared that off. And I'm leaving this part of the video in there because you can see that you make mistakes sometimes, and just move to a different part of the painting. That's what I did. And don't worry about it. So now I'm adding even more highlights, adding a little more yellow and a little more white. So the snout is sticking out there and it's going to be catching the light there, so we're going to put a highlight on the nose there. It's very subtle. Be very careful, don't overdo it, and it can really work out well. Okay, now we're going to go back up to the eyes, and this time instead of doing these circles around the eyes, I went ahead and put the white area in there first. And adding some highlights. Now we're going into the antlers, and you can sketch the shape that you want before you go painting it like I did. I've just drawn and painted so many deer since I was a kid that I'm pretty comfortable just painting right in there. But use the ears of the deer and other parts of it to gauge where the antlers turn. So just past the ears is the widest point usually for a mature buck. So that's where I put it out to. And I'm going back to the eyes here because you can move back and forth between different parts of the painting. That's the way I like to work and develop it all together. Some people develop each portion kind of independently, which is fine too. But so now I'm going back to the antlers again. And you can use the ears, as I said, as a gauge to where the points go. So we can see the second longest point there is about even with the end of the ear, and so that's where I put it. So same thing with this side as well. Now we're going in with the highlights here on the antlers, and obviously the right side of each tine is going to be illuminated by the sun. And I went pretty strong on the highlights here because the antlers tend to really catch the sunlight and it makes it stand out nice, and we're going to add shadows later. So now the inside of this antler is going to be catching the light. Now I'm adding highlights just to the outside, the outline of the ears there, because the fur is going to kind of glow, I guess, from the sun hitting it from behind. So just that outside edge of the fur where the sun is being caught is going to make the ear glow in a way, if that makes sense. And the underbelly of a deer is also white. So that's where that color comes from. And then it's got kind of a chest patch. And on the inside of the legs as well, which we're going to be adding. Alright, now I'm going back and adding the shadow on the opposite side of the antler. So each tine is going to have a shadow on the other side. Now adding some shadows in other parts of the anatomy. Deer also have kind of a dark patch on that joint on their back leg. I don't even know what that is. It's not an elbow, but it kind of sticks out there. Now I'm going back with some more highlights on that white patch on the throat. These final details really help it pop. And then on its chin, there's a white patch of fur around the nose. And around the eyes, as we've mentioned before. So I'm kind of just moving around, adding little details here and there, alternating between shadows and light areas, which I don't know if that's really best practice, but it helps me for it to all come together simultaneously. That's why I kind of alternate between the lights and darks. And we're nearly through here. I did leave out the feet, kind of cut that off at the bottom, so you'll have to watch a different video on how to draw deer feet. And there you have it, folks. Thanks for watching.